Hi everyone, welcome to today's IB Europe webinar. I'm just going to give it 1 minute to allow a few people to connect and then we will make a start. Okay, I think we'll make a start. I can see a few people are starting to connect. That's good. So hi everyone and welcome to our webinar. My name is Marie-Claire Puffett and I'm the Senior Manager for Marketing and Industry Programmes here at IAB Europe. And I'm delighted to kick off today's event in our Trust and Transparency series with our member Verve Group. So for those of you that don't know, our Trust and Transparency series has been running across the whole of September and is designed to dive into best practices and current initiatives as we look to drive greater trust and transparency across our industry. So the webinar today is being recorded and will be available to watch and share afterwards. So if you miss anything, don't worry. And today we have two great speakers with us from Verve Group. So we have Alan Nye, who is Director of Product Management focused on the sales side at Verve Group, and Alexei Molchan, who is Director of Product Management focused on the demand side at Verve Group. So Alan and Alexei are going to look at the three key areas of transparency and address the obvious and not so obvious applications of transparency in the places where it is seen and needed most. And then after the presentation, we will have time for a few questions. So if you do have questions for Alan and Alexei, please send them via the Q&A box that you can see on your Zoom screen. And with that, I am going to hand over to Alan and Alexei to kick off with their presentation. Over to both of you.
Okay, hey everyone, great to be here. So just a little bit about Verve Group. It's an end-to-end advertising platform working with publishers, advertisers, and beyond, privacy first, and we're aiming to build for the open internet. So today we're talking about trust and transparency, and our presentation is structured in line with our topic, which is good things come in threes. So we have three sections. In the first section, we're going to talk about a little bit about the roots, why we're talking about trust and transparency. Then we're going to talk about why we're talking about the threes. And in the end, we're going to talk about past, present, and future of transparency. So why are we talking about trust and transparency at all? So throughout the human history, it became quite obvious that in any ecosystem, there are good actors and bad actors, and basically the good actors, the ones who play by the rules, and the bad actors are the ones who abuse the system, the hackers. So it's like from the inception of the programmatic buying, it was apparent that there was a lot of fraud and opportunistic behavior and opacity from a lot of players. Why is it bad? Well, essentially it means a lot of money and effort is wasted. So publishers are not fairly paid for the great content they provide. Brands are not sure that they have advertising money reach the right audience through the right medium. So, and consumers, they suffer the most. Like they're seeing tons of irrelevant ads on low quality websites, and yeah, that these websites pretend to be someone else. So a lot has changed since these days, and the industry has consolidated their supply paths and reporting became more transparent. Privacy regulations, the very important part, they made it easier for consumers to understand and control their data. Yet the demand for transparency has grown even bigger with the rise of closed walled gardens, which, yeah, they close a lot of opportunities kind of to establish the level of trust the industry players are looking for. And the regulator bodies and industry leaders are playing like a key role in this continuous battle. So now the industry is looking for the next big thing, and trust and transparency plays a crucial role in shaping the future. So when we're talking about the 3's, why we're talking about 3's, and essentially good things come in 3's, right? And when it comes to demand for trust and transparency, there are three main sides: media buyers, advertisers, brands who are looking to promote themselves, media agencies working and acting on behalf of brands, and apparently the tech players, demand side platforms, ad servers, data management platforms. They are designed to help these to achieve their goals in the most efficient way. Then the inventory sources, the publishers, any kinds of apps who own the inventory content, and they are looking for the ways to monetize with the highest possible yield. And of course, the tech players like supply side platforms, publisher ad service, whose goal is to help the inventory owners to meet the demand of the advertisers, but at the same time maximize the publisher earnings along the way. And of course, it's consumers, it's us, people. We are looking for good content, and we are looking for good entertainment. We're looking for our privacy to be respected. So now talking a little bit about the media buyers more specifically, they need transparency on where the advertising budgets are spent and control of how they're being spent. Media buyers is a broad group, but essentially they're looking to control where the budgets are flowing and control of the process. More specifically, inventory details, brand safety. They want to make sure that there is no brand harm when running the advertising campaigns. Quality of the inventory, avoiding the clickbait publishers at all costs. Reporting, so all the inventory details have the insights for better performance. Transparent supply paths, the more direct, the more efficient. Targeting and audiences. They want to make sure that they control which consumers see the ads and in which environments. In fact, the total cost of ad fraud in 2022 was accounted for 81 billion, and it's predicted to increase. So we apparently see the big challenge here for the media buyers in understanding where the budgets are spent and making sure they're not wasted. So for the buy side, the keyword is trust. This actually resonates in every conversation, right, and in the pitch process with agencies and marketers. So it becomes a necessity, right, to have trust. So tech partners must act accordingly to win the hearts and minds of advertisers, whilst not becoming complacent. Alan, what's in there for publishers and consumers?
Just finding the mute button. 3 years of remote working, I'm still classically not able to function the webinars. So on a publisher side of things, so from what we see at Verve Group and what we understand with the industry, publishers, when it comes to trust and transparency, these are the 3 key points for them. Control of their monetization of their traffic, the ability to build trust with media buyers, and also building trust with consumers in a bit more depth. So when it comes to monetization, publishers want effectively greater transparency over and also control over how they can monetize their traffic. We've seen publishers such as Minute Media recently build out their own SSP, partially because they want more control over the way they monetize their traffic, but also partially maybe from a trust perspective and transparency perspective, having their own ad tech stack to monetize their inventory gives them that full transparency that they may not have had in the past. This is potentially a growing trend amongst publishers. We see the likes of Netflix coming into the game as well, providing advertisement there. But with publishers, generally they're looking to provide a lot more direct relationship with the media agencies, because as a publisher, they know more about their users, they know more about their data than anyone else. And effectively, they're looking for ways or technologies that allows them to better build that level of trust and with the media agencies and buyers, and also take control over it. And from that perspective, to a certain degree, vendors should work to provide a bit more of the features available for publishers, so that they can actually enable them when it comes to monetizing their inventory stack properly. And moving on to the trust with the media buyers, publishers have always wanted to, especially larger publishers, build direct relationship with agencies, whether it's preferred deals that they have or trading agreements that they have with agency groups. They have their own sales team, they have their own capabilities, they have their own understanding of their traffic, and the only thing they generally lack is a decent platform that allows them to monetize things in the way they want to, bespoke to their requirements with the media agencies. So publishers effectively need to be afforded that level of transparency and technology so they can grow their business off the back of platforms. And the last bit is publishers building trust with their consumers as well. This kind of goes nicely onto the next slide, which is how do we build trust with consumers between the end user and the content which they're consuming. In an age of new regulations for privacy, such as GDPR, CCPA, consumers to a certain degree are not fully aware potentially of what those regulations mean to them, what the purpose of the data that's being gathered on them means, and in many ways I think there's work to be done to better communicate the purpose in which our industry utilizes their data, how we utilize their data, and it's actually not that much of a scary thing. Obviously, there are incidents where it's been unsavory, in terms of how data is harvested and utilized for wider maybe political agendas potentially. But generally speaking, there's an education process required with the end user in terms of why we utilize data, and also understanding of the trade-off of that data as well. Back in the days before the internet, if we wanted content, we would have to buy a magazine or a newspaper, and end up effectively spending quite a bit of money buying physical copies of things to read. In the digital age, we've been blessed with effectively free access to information and content anywhere you go. And to a certain degree, the consumers may not understand or actually take for granted that this level of access or information is actually a trade-off with, effectively passing relatively harmless PI data that allows our industry to personalize adverts to them. End of the day, for the end user, it doesn't matter if the advert is personalized or not, because the end user has the choice whether they want to purchase that product. But yeah, from that perspective, we also need to provide more consumer-friendly privacy controls. As an end user myself, and everyone else on this call, nothing is more annoying, I'd say, than the large consent management platforms that pop up and take up a large portion of the real estate. On top of that, it's also quite confusing as to why we're checking these boxes, what's it for, who are these companies in there. They may not even know. So I think there's also an evolution to be had there with regards to how we better communicate the reasons for that consent we're looking to gain from the end user. I mean, so passing back actually to you, Alexei, to actually provide some hard facts and figures on the consumer side of things.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. In fact, we can see that at the moment, consumers, all of us people, we do not have a lot of trust in the online advertising ecosystem. So only 25% of consumers opt into app tracking on iOS, according to Statista, which means that advertisers not being able to basically do the proper targeting and attribution and essentially reach their goals, right? Or 42% of consumers have disregarded ads at all by installing the ad blockers, more predominantly on the web, but on mobile as well. It's a huge number, right? It shows like, hey, we do not trust the advertising, we do not trust the internet. Only 32% of consumers opt into personalized tracking by accepting all the cookies on website, again per Statista. So it's like 1/3 of the internet users, only 1/3, understands or pretends to understand why are they being tracked, and basically accepting that. But the other 2/3, they either don't understand or they disagree with the way the value proposition is being shaped. So I think these stats show that we need as an industry to be working a lot with consumers and provide the explanation on all the data usage and all the tracking in layman's terms, so that even a 5-year-old kid could understand why do they need to see the ads, and why do they need to accept certain tracking to be able to see the free content. But yeah, Alan, can we proceed to chapter 3 perhaps?
Sure. So on this section, we'll go through the past, present, and future of trust and transparency, and kind of go through and see what it was like in the past, starting with that. Historically, digital advertising and digital media, users have been bombarded with tons of irrelevant adverts. On top of that, ad networks used to effectively provide that level of scale when it comes to digital advertisement transactions. And from that perspective, from the agency side of things, it was also very difficult in the past to get any transparency as to how that media budget was spent. You used to get a report from the ad network. It would say 10 million impressions was ran on Forbes.com or CNN.com, but there was actually very little technology or understanding as to whether or not that actually ran on the right website, or whether or not it was actually 10 million impressions. And it was also basically just a spreadsheet that was sent over from ad networks, and the media agency effectively had to either trust it or go through a very rigorous and endless process to try and validate whether the media buy was legitimate or not. Off the back of that, of course, they kind of spun up a whole bunch of unauthorized resellers and fraudulent activity, which of course damages the trust that we're trying to build amongst the industry and amongst the advertisers that are spending money on this media channel. On top of that, from the end user's perspective, this also damages the end user experience, because of the vast majority of the ad tags that are running in the past to monetize websites. Web pages will also take a very, very long time to load. From a user's experience, not only is it damaging from having to wait forever for the web page to load, but it also the end user starts to question, why is it like this? Is it just my internet provider, or is there some things going on in the background? And of course, these things compounds year after year to build up to the point where regulations such as GDPR and CCPA comes around to protect the users, so from the vast amount of ad tags that's been running on their web pages. But going to the present, and I'm happy to say the industry and has worked really hard to provide some guidelines and regulations to eliminate a lot of the methodologies we had in the past, mainly through quality, supply, and technology. And going into each of these in a bit more detail, on the quality side of things, there's been a plethora of ad vendors that have provided us with technology and software and tools to protect us from IVT, maintaining ad quality, protect the brands in terms of brand safety, attribution partners to actually measure viewability, CTR, and attribution, as well as the actual ad servers themselves. And on top of that, also independent auditing processes coming in to validate whether these things are working as they should and as they've been spelled out. Off the back of that as well, through the IB Tech Labs, initiatives such as as.tech, sellers.json, and SChain, these guidelines have really fast forwarded us into a stage where we can be a lot more transparent about whether or not that media budget is actually spent in the right place, whether it's running across legitimate authorized websites or or whether or not it's running across spoof domains. The whole host of these issues that we've seen in the past has been, I wouldn't say eliminated, but reduced massively. Because and off the back of that, of course builds a lot more trust that the media buyers are confident that the media budget they spend is going in the right place at the right time and is not being misused. But then on top of that as well, there's tech transparency. There's industry boffins far cleverer than myself that have come together to produce things like the open source SDKs, the prebit.org. These particular tech infrastructures or tech frameworks provides a huge amount of transparency as to exactly how the inner workings function, and that also allows the rest of the industry to build off the back of it as well. This provides a lot more confidence and transparency to every single user, and whether it's consumer or whether it's the advertiser and the agency, to understand how the technology works. Part of that, of course, is also the IB Tech Lab, along with their think tanks, providing new standards and guidelines to foster more transparency. Moving on to the future, I'll hand back to Alexei for this bit.
Thanks, Alan. The future arguably is the most important part of this presentation, because we know what happened in the past, we know what we're doing now, but what should happen in the future? How should we design the internet and the advertising going forward? Well, our belief that it needs to be privacy first. We need to build solutions to continue reaching consumers, but respecting their choices. What it means in practice, well, contextual targeting, like moments.ai, which doesn't use any personalized tracking, right? We need to target the context, the consumers, they express interest, and we need to find a way to capture those interests without necessarily breaking into the privacy of the consumers. We need to have the redesigned privacy controls, probably built on blockchain or in Web3 economy world, where everyone can verify that basically these privacy controls or these privacy choices are actually respected and are actually transparent to the consumers. We should start targeting cohorts instead of individuals, like our Atom solution, because with cohorts we can still reach the level of precision needed to reach the goals, but at the same time we don't need to expose individuals to kind of tracking. The second key pillar is transparency on the industry impact. So companies, all the players and participants in the ecosystem, they need to assess how basically their activity influences the existence of the open internet and the consumer's choice and access to the information. There is an ongoing trend for reducing the carbon emissions and the carbon footprint, and I think we truly believe that it's a great initiative, and this needs to continue, and more players need to make conscious decisions, and brands need to have to be sustainable, right? That they need to turn into the brand sustainability should become a new currency, and basically everyone should think about what impact do we make and how can we reduce it. And last but not least, avoiding mistakes of the past. So we really need to learn from the past. As an example, I mean, we need to avoid legacy programmatic practices, which Alan mentioned from the early 2000s, right? So growth of new channels and emerging channels brings in challenges, and we need to learn from the past to overcome these challenges. So as an example, the CTV, a new channel growing really fast. According to one of the recent studies, 8 to 10% of streaming impressions play when the TV is shut off. So it means at least 10% of advertising impressions and advertising budgets are wasted. All the players in the supply chain need to be transparent about that, need to admit that this is happening and find solutions, talk about that, rather than hiding that and pretending that it's not happening. Now, supply path optimization has been a big topic in the past years, but now we need to rethink it and kind of introduce supply path optimization 2.0 with a lot of initiatives already happening, where there are more close strategic partnerships between media agencies and SSPs from one side, DSPs and publishers from the other side. This everything that creates more trust and transparency, and it provides transparency on the inventory, on the quality, on the audiences. So the closer ecosystem moves to each other, the players in the ecosystem, the better it will be for transparency and building that trust, and leaving the bad actors away and out of the game. Now a little bit about the topic of third-party cookies, right? We've seen what easily available identifiers like third-party cookies do to the industry. So, well, essentially they give the industry a very lazy solution for tracking, right? So luckily, knock-on effect with the introduction of a GDPR and CCPA and online privacy regulations has helped to mitigate that. But this is the lesson from the past, that the simplest method might not be the soundest method. So now the third-party cookies are going to be deprecated, and yeah, all the other identifiers are actually on the way, such as mobile ad IDs. The industry really needs to be strategic about that. We need to use all the collective minds to find the long-term strategy to transparent advertising, rather than using a workaround solution like third-party cookies were initially. So we have a couple of recommendations. It's nothing new, it's not revolutionary, but still, this is the basics which not a lot of companies and players in the ecosystem do. So first, you need to audit your level of transparency. And you really need to be honest about it, because transparency starts from every one of us, right? It's the conscious choices of each individuals staying behind each of the companies who work in the advertising ecosystem. And then, instead of doing something first, there needs to be a strategy in place. How are we going to increase the transparency? So you need to think how we can create more trust for our ad tech supply chain. What needs to be done? How can we achieve what our goal, right? What is the strategy? What are the long-term steps? And part of these could be working with the industry bodies such as IAB Tech Labs. It's actually the great place to voice the opinions, drive initiatives, and across the whole industry, right? Then again, and I'm not tired repeating that, we need to learn from the past, right? We've gone through the imperfect phases of topic of transparency. Now we have enough information, so we need to be conscious, and yeah, basically we should strive not to repeat the same mistakes over and over again when it comes to new media channels, new ways of transacting, and yeah, new ways to advertise. And we need to start, all of us need to start, support, and continue open dialogue with all the stakeholders across the industry, including the consumers. They should not be left out, right? It's actually the best way to validate like whether the solution is working or not. Also, like from the product management experience, right? Talk to the users. So in this case, consumers, talk to them, validate whether it works for them, and if not, try to find ways yeah, to iterate on that. And so finally, act, right? So act on the strategy, implement the tactics to work on the strategy. And I think it's really important to introduce a new KPI, which is called trust return on investment, right? This KPI needs to be introduced and measured, and for some companies needs to become a North Star. Okay, this is where we're going. So these are our recommendations, essentially on the topic of trust and transparency. And essentially, we kind of don't know what individually the rest of the industry is doing, but at least from the Verve Group perspective, our goal is to build the transparent, privacy first, and open platform to service the open web. So yeah, no closed gardens and so on. There are other companies with similar mindsets, such as the Trade Desk, for instance, and I'm pretty sure there are even more of them. And the more there are, well, the closer and the faster we'll get to a healthy, transparent, and sustainable internet. So yeah, let's make media better. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Alan and Alexei. That was really good, and I like the fact that you touched on quite a bit about consumers. I think we sometimes have a habit in our industry of being, you know, kind of talking about transparency amongst ourselves, suppliers, etc. When actually, you know, all of this is for consumers. So I think that's a really good point made. I have a couple of questions, and I think you did touch on this one a little bit, but I'm just gonna go back if that's okay. So obviously you mentioned the deprecation of third-party cookies and mobile ad IDs as well. So what impact do you think the deprecation of those is going to have on transparency? And do you think those changes that will be made will help to build consumer trust? To either of you.
Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can take this one. So I'd say from a transparency perspective, there are pros and cons to this. From a consumer's perspective, you know, having kind of working off cohorts or privacy sandboxes, as opposed to cookies that can identify and track you across multiple stages of your consumer's journey, is possibly a good thing. It kind of builds a bit more trust and a bit more confidence for the end user that they know, you know, they're not being, you know, tracked across the internet. There's a certain notion in you know, mainstream media that it's almost like, you know, 1984 Big Brother style, where everything's being looked at. So from that perspective, fine. And on top of that, I also think the deprecation of cookie is actually not a bad thing. The cookie was something that was utilized and, you know, started how we tracked end users and it became almost a default and an imperfect default as to how the industry functions in terms of tracking end users. The actual, you know, platforms and companies and multi-billion-dollar enterprises were built off the back of the humble cookie. You know, it's quite a you know, unsavory position to be in, where you're, you know, hinging the, you know, your entire business and technology stack of one single entity such as that. And I think it's actually a good time, that deprecation of cookie for the industry. We have to look at alternatives. We have to look at different ways of understanding the end user without making them feel uncomfortable. How the industry tackles that, of course, Google have said many times that we're going to get rid of it. Oh, we're going to delay it a bit more. We're going to delay it a bit more. However, these particular delays to the deprecation of third-party cookies on Chrome has actually put the industry, I think, in good stead. Every time there's a deadline, a looming deadline, the industry has worked towards solutions. With each delay that's come along, the industry has come closer and closer towards a more sustainable solution to replace the cookie. So from the industry's perspective and from the end user's perspective, I think it's actually a good thing, and there's an opportunity, if anything, where we can move away from, I guess, making the end user feel uncomfortable and having a more transparent and trustworthy way of monetizing and providing the open web.
Yeah, just to add a little bit on that, I think when it comes to consumer trust, well, the trust will start at least from removing the annoyance of having to accept all the different trackings, right? This will go away with the lack of third-party cookies. I mean, there will be still kind of first-party cookies or any other identifiers which kind of serve the same purpose, perhaps, but not everywhere. And consumers will that process will start, I believe, like building the trust, because they will see, okay, we don't have those annoying pop-ups anymore. Probably something has changed, and with a proper level of education, we'll be able to kind of yeah, start the process of creating the trust.
Great, yeah, and I liked Alan that you noted that actually we should look at this as an opportunity for the industry, which I think lots of people do, so that's good. So just moving on a little bit then, so what about efficiencies? So do you think that being transparent and adjusting to all these standards, and do you think that players can remain efficient in achieving their goals, or is it too much? What do you think?
I can take that one. Well, actually, I believe absolutely, yeah, absolutely, because I mean, essentially, if efficiency depends on transparency, because currently in the past there was inefficiency because no one knew where the ad dollars are flowing, right? And advertisers could not measure their return on investment. Publishers did not understand whether they paid fairly, right? So with all these transparency efforts, it's going to be less players with more efficiency, because everyone will know everyone, and the practices will be standard, and there'll be fair monetization for publishers and really good results for advertisers, because they will know, they will have control over, like, okay, where do I spend my advertising dollars? Why do I spend them there? And when this level of transparency will be finally in the industry, it will be good only not for the efficiency, but also getting back to the consumers, right? They will know and understand clearly why are they watching these ads? Why is their data being collected? And when they give when they consciously accept, let's say, that some of the value exchange, when some of their data is being taken by advertisers or publishers in exchange for the content they like, and when this value exchange is going to be clear, then it will create additional efficiency, because also the way advertisers will collect and activate this data is going to be transparent. And the better advertisers and marketers can do their job in segmenting the audiences and tailoring the right message to the right people, the better return on investments are, and the better the yield for the publisher. So I absolutely believe that efficiency will not only be improved, it will skyrocket, to be honest.
Yeah, just adding to your points there, Alexia, as well. I also agree that it'd be more efficient. Historically, I'd say, because of the lack of transparency, especially from the advertising agency side, they've had to utilize different ways of trying to measure things, which may not actually be the most efficient way of measuring things. This could, that lack of transparency could be culture, it could be lack of, technical advancement. But with, now we're kind of building out better transparency frameworks, whether that's the way we run businesses and function as a business and commercially, whether that's the technical technologies we have at our disposal today. It actually, I think, should give advertising agency more effective ways of measuring their ROI and the success of their campaigns, as opposed to, I would say, sometimes questionable ways of measuring ROI of campaigns, which is, potentially not indicative of the success of a particular campaign. It doesn't really measure whether the end user engaged or have a certain affinity to a certain brand properly. I think this greater level of transparency should allow everyone the opportunity to, that word again, opportunity, to actually build something that measures things properly and be more efficient in the way we measure things.
Lots of opportunity here. So much. Okay, right, I'm going to close with one final question. So just a quick one. So if you had to name, this is to both of you, if you had to name the most important component for building trust with consumers, what would that be?
I can go first for this one.
Thinking faces.
It is a big question. It's hard to whittle it down to one thing. If I was to choose one, I'd say it's how us as an industry, or how us as publishers, communicate that trade-off.
Okay.
Between
so getting the consumer to understand
exactly.
why they're giving consent, and why they're passing off some of their data.
Exactly.
For the advertising. Yeah.
Exactly. It's also an understanding that the data they're sharing with us is not particularly harmful to them. It doesn't pinpoint them in a particular way. It doesn't. It's not a big brother thing.
It's all perfectly safe and legitimate, and yeah.
Exactly. And the trade-off, of course, is, as an end consumer, I don't want to subscribe to 17 different magazines and 13 different streaming services. I want to access it as freely as possible.
freely and efficiently as possible. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Alexei?
I can only agree to that. And actually, I just want to give one example. I mean, education for me, the key component is education. So today, my 9-year-old son asked me, "Hey, Dad, why do I need to watch those annoying ads on YouTube? I don't want to watch them. I like 15 seconds. Why do I need?" So when we as an industry succeed to explain to this 9-year-old boy why does he need to watch these ads, and explain that, you know, some of his personal information is going to be shared along the way, only then we'll really build the trust, and it will be the key component. Everything else, well, we'll just build on top. But if there is no understanding at the core of it, then basically
so we need to just start educating, literally one, you know, if we start with our kids, you know, one person at a time, and we will hopefully get there. Cool. Well, I've really enjoyed the discussion there. I think there's some really good things to think about, you know, to Alan's point a couple of times, lots of opportunity. You know, let's learn from the past. Let's not do things how we've perhaps done them previously, and look to the future and all of the opportunities. So thank you so much to everyone for joining. Thank you to Alexei and Alan for taking their time to take us through the presentation. And as I mentioned, today's session has been recorded, so will be available to view back on IAB Europe's website later on today. Yeah, thank you so much everyone for taking the time, and have a good day.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.